Peoria State Asylum, or the Bartonville Asylum, home for the incurably insane. Does not look like there's a way into it. They're going to tear it down.
No.
But we can still walk the grounds. I mean, I'm okay with that too. I don't have an issue walking around, checking out some stuff. The
800 feet, your destination will be on the right.
The complex is fairly large. It's not huge. A lot of buildings are gone, but the complex is large enough to get some nice outside pictures. I'd love to go inside, but it does not appear there's a way inside.
Your destination is on the right.
Oh, they marked it there because the property used to be owned by it. So they marked it all the way to the end. Beautiful asylum building. Beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't know. Looks like they're working on the water tower. They'll let you walk around it. You can walk the grounds. It's like the Stewart Indian School. Looks like they might be trying to utilize these buildings around here. Yeah.
Those are businesses.
And tech services, yep. I'm just trying to figure out where we can park. Now, this was part of the asylum. Do you see this? These were like the workshops. There's a cemetery here too, because it's a potter's field. But there's this tragic story about one of the mentally insane here used to dig the graves, and eventually he passed away, and a lot of the nurses, see the remodeling right there, they got dumpsters. A lot of the nurses and doctors were in tears for this person, and his ghost still haunts this asylum. They used to call him Old Elm, or the Ghost of Elm. So this place does have its fair share of history and stories. However, the main building looks gutted, and it does not look like anybody's been in there in a while. There is a light on the front. But you can still walk the grounds. It looks like probably there was a building here and here, and they replaced it with warehousing because they're making this a business park instead, which I see very common with asylums. They turn into business parks. And that may be a similar situation with this place as well. I just need to find a place I can park. These are businesses. Some of them are still original on site. That's not. That's brand new. But they're going to tear down the main building, so I might as well photograph and get some stuff of it. It's gutted. You can see right through. Private property, so you keep, because that's that place there. We'll go over here. I'm guessing we'll have to cross. There's hardly any buildings left of this place. The gym, the cafeteria, all of it. There's probably a few back here.
Probably on your left.
Well, that's an abandoned building. Tech seems to be owning most of this. Yeah, that's part of the old buildings. They were probably dorms, or they had here, I have a list of stuff. We can start here. They had a cafeteria. We can just walk through and take some pics. A bunch of other things for the mentally insane to do, like workshops, things that help. We're walking to the Peoria State Asylum, known for the incurably insane. This was not a nice place. I've heard some nice stories about some of the patients here. How there's a story I'll tell you later. However, generally these places were not nice. Like Tammy was saying, they were probably hosed down instead of had private showers. We're given a little small room, a little window to look out of.
No, these big halls.
Well,
Here's the hall with 40 others.
the asylum's abandoned, but it's been recently purchased, and there's a business here. There's Club Phoenix and Tech and a couple other businesses that want to put in a business park here, and it is a business park, bunch of storage facilities and offices. It doesn't mean we can't go. I drove here to see it. It may not be the most exciting thing in Illinois, but it is something to see, and it doesn't cost a single dime just to go up to it and enjoy its architecture. But this is known as the Barton State Hospital, Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane, or the Bartonville State Hospital, Illinois State Hospital, and it operated from 1902 to 1973. In the 1895, plans were laid out for an asylum in the region. Peoria is a fairly decent-sized city in Illinois, and you had a lot of insane. Well, a lot of times what they do is they make these places into apartments or museums. So you may not, I don't think there's any access into this place. There was a few months ago, but not anymore, not since it's been purchased. There's still some cool stuff to explore on the grounds. State Hospital is located in Peoria County, in the town of Peoria, suburb of Bartonville. And at one time, there was 47 buildings on site. Most of them, I've looked around on the property, most of the buildings are being renovated, remodeled, some are being torn down. This building was supposed to be torn down. I believe they're going to keep it. They should. It's on the National Registry of Historic Places to check out. There's a cemetery somewhere near here too, so we need to look. There's more here than what you think. It's not just, you know what I'm saying? It's not just an asylum. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the grounds.
Yeah.
Nice building.
Yeah.
They simply don't want anybody going in it. And you know what's going to happen with this place? They're going to turn it into a ghost tour site, and then ghost hunters will go here, and ghost adventures. Of course, nobody is going to care about the place till it reaches our website. Then everybody's going to be like, oh, let's go to the asylum in Illinois. That's all great. Explore away. But let's keep it fun, folks. Not do stupid shit on television with this place. Here, hold this. This building was completed in 1897. Oh, riding his tractor through here. Damn sun was in the... This building was completed in 1897. It was at one time there was two buildings. The first building that was resurrected looked more like a fortress or a castle. However, it was replaced by a cottage plan under Dr. Frederick Howard Wines, the able secretary of the State Board of Charities. So there was, another structure that stood here. I still think this looks like a fortress or a prison. It doesn't matter if they rebuilt it or renovated it, it still is what it is. It's a pretty creepy looking building. In 1902, just a few years after the completion of the structure and the building, it was remodeled and renovated. Under the reconstruction of Dr. George Zeller, a cottage system was set up with 33 buildings on site. The cottage system would have different workshops, buildings, structures to benefit the insane. For example, they'd have caretaker housing for nurses to reside at, a store, a power station, even a communal utility building for the electricity and so forth. And I may have traveled far to see this place, but I haven't seen a good state asylum in years. So to come up here is not a big deal. because I'm getting to see what I wanted to see, which is this asylum. In 1902, February 10th, operations began. A lot of the Incurable were transferred to Bartonville from Illinois facilities or statewide. In 1906, the hospital opened as a training school for nurses. This used to be probably the basement. It's filled in. And in 1907 and 1909, the facility was called the Illinois General Hospital for the Insane. In 1909, that year it was called the Peoria State Hospital. In 1927, almost 3,000 patients resided here. It had almost 14,000 patients who stayed at this facility. Supposedly, it's rumored to be a haunted site. I could imagine that tragedy happened. These were not nice places. People were hosed down, hung out in the halls, were raped, were abused, hit. There wasn't many safety laws protecting the criminally there wasn't many safety laws protecting the insane. They were misunderstood, and some never got out. Some ended up staying here for decades and died on this land and were buried somewhere on the grass surrounding this very building, and I don't know where. You know they're not going to label it. They're just not. It's a potter's field, which means most of the time they're not given any graves at all. So you don't even know where the bodies are. You could be walking over them and you'd never know who the person is. There's no cross, there's nothing to bear a name. From about 1943 to 69, the hospital did participate in a departmental affiliation program. It was for psychiatric nursing. And they provided the nurses how to treat the patients, how to perform psychiatric nursing. And this place served as an outlet for general schools in the area for students to come here and practice, for the colleges and so forth in Illinois. However, from 1917 to 61, the hospital was operated by the Illinois Department of Public Welfare. In 61, the Department of Mental Health was created and took over the responsibilities here. The peak of this hospital dates back to around 1950s when it housed almost 3,000 patients, and by 1972, its closure was announced. The patient census was around 600. The buildings stood abandoned, were auctioned off, and when the original auction buyer went bankrupt, Winsley Duran Jr. took over the ownership with the hope of creating a business park like you see here. And his plan never came to be. The buildings remain empty, and a lot of them have been either developed, renovated, or demolished. This one has cameras. Somebody does own it, and I hope they fix it up. But like I say, they probably turn it into a moneymaker for tours, and that's okay, I guess. But it would have been nice to have been able to see it before that transpires, because once a place is tainted with tours, it's really not the same anymore as far as the ghost and the hauntings that come with it. Sit right here in the shade. There's a lot of ghost lore that's associated with this place. One documented ghost tale or legend tells of Emmanuel A. Bookbinder. He was called Old Book. That was his nickname. He was a patient who stayed at this hospital for many years, was part of the burial crew, because the patients would grow their own crops, bury their dead. They would take care of one another, and they worked while they were living on this site. It wasn't free to live here. You did do some work. Some of the mentally insane that were too beyond help would sit all day in the cafeteria playing around with an object, while many of the other mentally insane would actually do labor type of work on the grounds, digging a garden, working at the workshops, maybe helping out, cleaning up the store. They did get jobs, but they were here for a very long time, because they were thought to be incurable. But anyhow, Old Book was on a death crew, or burial crew rather, let me say. And he had passed away. He spent so many years burying people here. But on his death, Dr. Zeller, who was responsible for the growth of this school, patients and even nurses had seen his ghost the day he died, the day after he died. And they said hundreds attended this man's funeral. And they called him Old Elm. And they said he haunts the Potter's Field, haunts the hospital. He's seen all over. I could have Old Elm staring at me from one of the windows. I would never know it in a place like this. When they inspect his casket, I guess it looked like his arms were in a loving position. Thus, they call him Graveyard Elm. And his ghost and all the strangeness with the casket derives from the Potter's Field, wherever that may be. Here could be anywhere. We don't know. And Dr. Zeller, a very bright man in the 1920s, had written a book called Befriending the Bereft. And it was drawn from mysterious experiences he had at the hospital while working here as a superintendent from 1902 to 1913 and 1921 to 1935. Included them were a bunch of other eerie stories, and in that book was the tales of Graveyard Elm. So now you guys get an idea. It's wide open. Obviously, they're afraid people might come in and fall out because kids like to hang at the top of the windowsills leaning over. So, they might end up destroying it. They may not. They may save it. I don't know. I'd prefer to see the building saved, not destroyed. But for some people, I'm sure they'd be happy this place was gone, knowing that they had family in here for decades that would never be released and would end up dying on this property. And some of the deaths that occurred here were murders, were staff abusing patients. Some women would have babies in the asylum because rape would also occur. Was not the happiest of places. But when I do these asylums, I do them with great care, and I try to respect the history and understand, try to put myself as to what the patients had to go through when they were here. And what they had to go through was a horror in itself. And you can tell, they have logs here, so they have maybe some people who might they give tours and might sit around the fire in front of the asylum and enjoy a campfire tale, some ghost stories. Just beyond the asylum is thick woods and foliage. Most of the state of Illinois has this. We're in an area also that's known for its monsters, cryptids, strange creatures that have been sighted in this region. The Peoria region is magnificent. This isn't the only historical site. There's quite a few. We just got done leaving Springfield, visiting the Lincoln Tomb and home. And then we shot up north to visit this beautiful asylum. The planes come pretty close to this place. But I'm taking readings, EMF ghost readings, because I want to know. Is there a ghost here? I can't really do credible readings. Because it would be nice if if our EMF went off in the middle of the field, this would be like, hey, that might be where the Potter's Fields are. However, there's nothing to signify that because the meter hasn't been going off. And if I get too close to see how it's lit and there's cameras up in the window, it'll set the EMF off. So getting credible readings here might be a little difficult unless we were deeper inside, further away from any power source. But it's obvious that the place does have some power. There is a light right before me at one of the main entrances into this beautiful state hospital. It's always good when you're out taking photos to focus on windows. A lot of times good apparition photos will come from little windows like on top where you might catch a glimpse of something looking down at you. Kind of like the ghost that's sighted in the Pike Mansion in Alton. Sometimes it likes to stand up above, high up in the windows of the Pike Mansion and look down. So you just never know. You could see some of the floors. You can clear see through them. My speculation is that most of the asylum's gone. You had over 30 buildings on site, and now most of the buildings that I see are fairly new, like this one, for example. It's now from the 1800s. The ones across the street are brick buildings, probably were dorms or for staff. that stayed on site for a few days on, few days off. And they're all boarded up, and eventually those will become offices as well. So asylums like this, they just don't last in America. You've had 150 castle-like asylums, and almost every one of them has been destroyed in the last 15 years of me being in this career, where I've gotten to it too late, or I get to it where they're just tearing it down. So, you know, there was one asylum, 8 miles of tunnels underneath the asylum, all closed off. So it's getting really hard to do places like this, and the only way you're going to know about it is if you come here to appreciate the value and what they stood for, because I'll tell you what, folks, probably in a few months this one won't be standing either. This is Lord Rick. Check out our site. We're at the Peoria State Hospital, known as the Illinois Insane Asylum, or Bartonville Asylum for the Incurable. Check out our site, www.paranormalghostsociety.org. They call this place Constitution Place. It is an all-American state hospital, that's for sure. I mean, there's so many tales about this place. There's only a couple abandoned asylums in Illinois, and they're barely hanging on from the havoc of demolition, or otherwise people trying to buy up the properties and say, we're going to have a ghost town, we're going to have a ghost tour, it stays abandoned 20 more years. They board it up with cameras, you can't get in, so you never get to see it, period. But they had a store and some other structures, some workshops, nurses' quarters. This was a cottage system. In other words, you had your main administration building, and then you had cottages that the patients could live in.
Someone's yelling.
I heard a scream, I don't know. Oh, open every weekend in October, Asylum Acres.
Yeah, but we heard someone scream.
Wow. I'll drive to that one. But this one we need pictures of before they remodel, and it don't look like an old building. Get your online tickets, get your online tickets.
It's a haunted house.
Right here's the haunted house.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's supposed to be like that.
It says haunted infirmary.
This whole complex back here, but I don't think so.
Yeah? Haunted infirmary. Cool. It is Halloween. Here's the thing, no matter what buildings they build on this land will always be haunted. There's a couple places I've been to back east like this where they turn them into business parks, and the property, the grass, the lawn, the sidewalks are still haunted. You come here at night, you see things that don't add up. You know, you get EVPs when you're by yourself on the grounds. So my theory is that the grounds will still continue to be haunted, probably by Old Elm, who was a caretaker here. What a perfect little place to hold a haunted house for Halloween. Peoria, I've heard a lot about. There are ghost towns, there are haunted abandoned buildings. I wish I had more time here, but I have to head back to the hotel and into town for tomorrow's flight and get packed up again. It's just around the corner, dude. But these are some of the last remaining buildings before they get renovated like the other ones. Like I say, nurses' quarters, chapel. You had your areas where procedures were performed. This hospital had over 30 buildings. A store for the employees so they can buy necessities. This is an abandoned building. They put a new garage on it, but it's still probably not done with the restoration. I can tell by the roofing and the wood beams up above. There just really isn't that much remaining anymore. Is it worth the few hour drive to come here? Well, I guess so. And all due considering this place is kind of historic in its own shape, way, or form. Jared, there's someone... Dude, there's a person coming. That's not the best place to do that.
There. I tried scanning you.
Looks like we're not the only ones here. This place was turned into a bar. It's not a bar anymore. You know that? This was probably the gym and that was the cafeteria. So tomorrow we head back up to the Lake Tahoe area. It's been a great 5-day trip. Done the 7 Gates of Hell, Lincoln Memorial Tomb at Oak Ridge Cemetery, the house and neighborhood that Lincoln lived most of his life at, his only house that he owned. Tomorrow we're going to visit the Basilica for a second time. They were closed, so we didn't get to do too much. Also visited the Crome Family Cemetery, the McPike Mansion, Alton National Cemetery. All these wonderful sites. Visiting the St. Louis Zoo. Didn't investigate it. That was just a little fun extra thing. Had some good eats. Her pizza yesterday. And we visited up near Old. Oh yeah, that's right. And I also ventured into some caves to look for the Payasa bird. And there's a petroglyph of a giant beastly man bird that used to devour natives of the tribe. And then I explored some caves. Went to the area where Douglas and Lincoln shared their final debate for the presidential election, which took place up there. Up not too far from Alton. So all in all, folks, this was a really good trip. And tomorrow we'll taper it off with a few brews, some relaxing times, maybe at a pub before we have to board our plane. We'll go to the Basilica, finish up some historical and paranormal research there, and then we're out of here. But I got a 4-hour drive home, so it's time to go. Just want to say peace. We're at the Peoria State Hospital. This is Lord Rick. They're restoring these grounds, so forgive all the dumpsters and construction. Enjoy it one last time, folks. This may not be standing in a few more months, and if it's not, at least we'll have the videos and pictures to remember this very beautiful historic site and structure in the state of Illinois in connection with its mental health patients.
Well, all 4 of them in the car were on their phone.
Yeah, paranormal apps probably. Oh man, that building hasn't been restored. It's empty, just storage right now.
Just let him know when we get back to the hotel because he wants to come and spend time with us.
That's fine. Does he want to go bowling? Ask him. We can do some bowling tonight. I'm sure he would like that. It's not going to take me long to get back in the town. A couple hours.
You can eat whatever you want.
I'm saying, does he want to go bowling? Because I did find 2 bowling alleys not far from Grand. This is where they have the haunted hospital. Wow. Yeah, where all these buildings stand used to be hospital grounds for the patients and other facilities. This was a nursing training facility for psychiatric nurses to get their training from college in Illinois. This is where they came. Crazy, huh? You wouldn't think that. You would not think that. All this open land was part of the hospital. They used to grow crops and everything at these hospitals. Tried to be self-sufficient. Plus it would give the mentally insane something to do, to be able to dig a garden or participate in some of the workshops they had on site. Different cottages had different job positions, different staff who had higher positions within the mental health facility, such as head nurse. You know, you had your main doctors, not your orderlies. The orderlies would probably just come up here to do their work and go home for the day, while other staff had to live on campus permanently. And the doctor who had this place designed as a cottage asylum had written his own book of ghost tales associated with this place, or strange things.
Turn left on South Adams Street.
Boy, I'm going to miss that place. That's a nice asylum. I've been in bigger, but I'll tell you what, that's a fortress. That's a castle. And I guarantee you, it's haunted. But look at it one last time, everyone, because it may not be here soon. This is Lord Rick, live in Peoria, Illinois.